purely political, is what we're saying when we say that the war has become sectarian. Furthermore, he hypothesizes the fact that the funding of these rebel groups is going to determine the overall outcome of the Syrian civil war. And he actually compared it to the Algerian civil war in the 90s. And he said that, it doesn't really matter what happens with in the long run, it doesn't matter much what happens with the government, because what's going to happen is the rebel group, which has the greatest leadership capabilities and the most funding and the most power by the end of it, that's who's going to be in charge of the end. And so when I commented that, well, it can't get much worse than the chemical weapons issue, he told me that yes, it can get worse, because obviously there's still the potential for spillover. I hadn't considered that. And so when we're looking at spillover, what we're really talking about is this war spilling over, and we're talking about missiles going into other countries, either by misfire or intentionally. We're also talking about what happened in Tunisia, where you've got one statewide national dispute, disagreement, conflict, civil war, revolution, whatever you'd like to call it, spreading and going into other countries. We're already seeing, if you remember the map from earlier, we're already seeing that a little bit in Iraq. We're seeing, minor protests, but still, it's enough that we raise concern and we go, you know what, we need to stop this from spreading into other countries. And that's part of why the refugee crisis has become so bad. It's because it's affecting those people. And actually, if you look back at the refugee crisis, you realize that in Lebanon, they have so many school-aged children there that they're estimated by next year, the number of school-aged Syrian children will actually outnumber the number of school-aged Lebanese children. So, just, not good. So, anyway, but Turkey has worked with the U.S. to get Patriot missiles to defend itself in case of a spillover, and Jordan has worked with the CIA to be on the defensive. Those two countries are probably going to be all right. But again, we're looking at minor protests, we're looking at, reforms, we're looking at things, even just neighboring countries, no matter what they do, we're probably going to see those things. So moving on, by the way, this is the guy we're talking about, everyone. This is President Bashar al-Assad. This was when he won election, last time I believe, when he won re-election. So what I found in my data findings by interviewing Dr. Collins was that the removal of al-Assad really isn't going to do anything. He can stay in office as long as he wants, and at least while he's in office, he's protecting the minorities. But as of right now, even if President Assad is removed, the rebel fighting isn't going to stop, because you're fighting a new war. You're almost fighting a war on terrorism again within Syria, within their own state. And they're fighting their own war on terrorism. And that's what al-Assad has been calling the rebel opposition since the beginning of the conflict, was terrorist. And his theory was that, these are foreign interventionists, they're coming into this country, they're looking to upset it based on the West's agenda, and this is what started the war. And whether or not, his theory is true is irrelevant. The fact is that it's an image, and right now the rebel opposition isn't going to stop unless al-Assad is out of office. So, the Assad regime has the upper end of the war again, which I didn't realize beforehand. I had been reading news articles, but I hadn't realized that. And, he's in favor of the majority. It's just, there are no significant research or data polls. Obviously, it's a war-torn country. They're not going to be surveying people, on the street corner. How do you like the president? They're not going to do it. But generally speaking, he is in favor of the majority. So when you're looking, even with the people who are not fighting, the people who are still civilian, they're in favor. However, the war needs to be contained above all else is my new theory. That even the humanitarian issue is still very, very important, but even more important is that the war needs to be contained. And in fact, oh dear, where did I put this card? All right, well, yes, the UN Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, my card, her name is Valerie Amos, and she actually commented that this is not a crisis that will be solved through humanitarian efforts. And that's very true. What needs to happen, the war needs to be contained, the war needs to be minimized, Assad needs to be flexible and either move aside or step down. And that will at least lead to, at least solving the other issues. Because what we're looking at right now, we're looking at opposition forces who are just saying, we need to get rid of Assad. And again, you see it with Al-Qaeda and the FSA. They have other issues with each other, and they have other issues with the government. But their primary thing, the thing that puts them on the same side, is Assad. So, yeah, And finally, of course, Syria still needs representation in some sort of fresh leadership, whether that's a complete government constitution change or whether that's, just, switching the leadership. It doesn't matter. They need something fresh in their nation. So my challenges and limitations. Obviously, it's a war-torn state, and the U.S. is not going to let someone go over there for a college honors project. But furthermore, of course, there are financial implications of that. So, furthermore, my inability to read Arabic was a big problem because while I was able to read Al Jazeera and even some of the German news stations, and I was able to go through some of those, and obviously BBC is available, Deutsche Welle is available, but there are several Arabic news agencies that would have been very, very helpful in discovering more about what is going on in the Arab world and what their view of it is. Furthermore, because again, the internet is so widely implemented in Syria, so widely used in Syria, there are many people in Syria who are affected by this who are actually keeping blogs, and they're writing Facebook posts and keeping their Facebook pages updated, things like that. And that would have been very interesting to read those and to interview those people, to talk with them, but unfortunately I don't have that capability. Furthermore, unfortunately, I do have a rather shallow foundation in Syrian politics and economics, so looking at that and realizing that I don't understand the political implications of the ideas that I have is, it's a big problem in realistically forming an opinion. Furthermore, of course, this is a live topic, and every time that I step away from the news station, something else happens, and I didn't catch everything. And I've been following this event since Egypt, so even before Syria broke out in conflict, but everything changes so very fast. And I'm excited to see, though, that as this is continuing, that things are going to change, and we'll see other details will come to light. There were further this was my biggest issue. There were difficulties in finding professionals and Syrian people to interview. I wound up interviewing Dr. Paul Lenz, of course, but unfortunately he was my only person whom I was able to interview. It's my hope that in future research I'll be able to find more professionals or more Syrian people to interview and to talk with and to discuss this issue with, but as of right now, he was my only one. And part of that reason is I did email and I did call people, but of course it's final season, so it was difficult to get away from, it was difficult to find professors, and it was difficult to find refugees because Arizona is just not exactly a hotspot for Syrian refugees. We're not Finland. Okay, so need for future research, I discussed this with you, and acknowledgements, last thing, then I'll let you guys do whatever you want to do. Professor Carol Johnson, who somehow, some way made me feel a lot less scared this semester, which was wonderful because I was terrified. Professor Tamara Cochran, who I think 4 of 3 of you know, she's wonderful, she's fantastic, she was our honors professor last semester. She was very helpful in helping me choose a topic. Professor Sue Warner, who's at SMC, she is chair of the political science division, I believe, and she has been my mentor for this project, and although it's not her field of expertise, she's been very, very helpful in trying to find me people who I was able to talk with. She got me the list of all the professors who I contacted, regardless of whether or not they emailed me back. That was still a result of Professor Stu Warner, which was incredible. Dr. Paul Lenz at NAU, who gave his time so willingly and graciously to me, even though he had no idea who I was or what I wanted. Professor Catherine Chloropoulos, who used to be a professor here but transferred, I think, to ASU or something. She's teaching somewhere wonderful too, I'm sure. And all of you guys, and all of the people from SMC last year who were wonderful and supportive and listened to my rants and ravings, so thank you. And that's my project, so, and I have references, but yeah. The end. Questions?
Oh, wait. Are we supposed to be on the stage? Questions?
Questions? Comments? Concerns? Mutual ravings?
I don't want to take up any time because I know Cynthia's going next, but I just had one kind of question / observation. One of your main points to your thesis was that Assad should step down. And I understand, you said it's kind of his face has been associated with the conflict, and nobody's going to be happy until he's gone.
Right.
But then at the same time, a lot of your findings indicated that even if he were to step down, it wouldn't have that much of an impact on the current conflict. So my question was, and then you also mentioned that Assad, at the same time, he's protecting minorities that a lot of the rebel groups are not. And so my question is, you mentioned that it's that really the ultimate thing is that he needs to step down and then all these other things need to happen. But then you keep mentioning that, everyone says, the experts say that it's not really going to do anything.
Right.
So that's kind of my question.
The problem with Assad staying in power is that if you look at the history of groups such as Al-Qaeda and other rebel groups in the Middle East, when you look at the history of them, they don't give up. They generally won't give up their fighting until they at least attain their main goal. That having been said, I have no doubt that there will be other protections for the minorities in the Middle East, for the minorities in Syria. And personally, on a personal note, when I first walked into this project, I had been anti-Assad. However, having done the research on it and having read even just some of the English blogs on part of Syrian people and other people in the Middle East who have had experience dealing with this, I've come to grow a little bit fonder of Assad because he provides protection. That having been said, that's why I feel that perhaps removing Assad isn't going to speed along the solution, but I do think that it's the only way to get the rebel groups to stop fighting. So, if you're looking at what's going to cause those groups to stop fighting, I think that he needs to be removed. I think that that's what's going to actually solve the at least work towards solving the Syrian civil war and work toward those negotiations. However, I don't agree with it. I think that there have got to be some other way to do it, has got to be some other way to do it. I just don't see it. I don't see it because I'm looking at what the rebel groups have and what they've traditionally done in the past, and I don't think that they're going to stop fighting. So, if you're looking at what's going to stop the fighting, it's a removal of Assad. If you're looking at what's going to continue to protect the minorities, it's Assad.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, any
Yeah.
civil war is.
I mean, you're saying, I'm just trying to, I'm not, I
No, I know.
was really impressed, and I honestly thought it was a terrific presentation. I just had, you mentioning that, the only way to stop the fighting is if Assad goes, but then at the same time, keep saying, the experts often say, even if he goes, it's not going to stop the fighting. So that's, you understand where I'm coming from?
That's why I had to change my project, was because I found out, I didn't change the project entirely, but I found out over time there's no real solution to it. What I sought out to do was to find a legitimate theoretical solution, and I was going to do the economy, the social issues, the political issues. It was too much for me, and I found that there's no real solution. Had there been a real solution, the people who have been in this field for the last 40, 50, 60 years in the UN and the other variety of states would have found it far before I would have. But I see what you're saying because it is confusing. And truthfully, looking back on my presentation, I don't think I answered your question.
Yeah,
But I don't know if there is an answer to that question.
I don't know if it's even
So,
an answerable question.
thanks for the question. I'm sorry I don't have a
No,
better answer
no,
for you.
I wasn't even saying to question you, but just to kind of raise that issue, you know what I mean? Because
it is a problem.
for a lot of people, it's like, Assad needs to go, and I understand where they're coming from, but, I know a Syrian, I have a Syrian friend, and says that, yeah, Assad did a lot of stuff that it wasn't great, but life was okay.
Right.
Life was fine in Syria. And when all the groups came in, and, the protests initially were okay, but then when other groups started coming in, and, everyone just wants to go back to Assad now.
Right.
And so that's when I keep hearing, and like you're saying, Al-Qaeda's not going to stop until they get what they want. And what they want is someone who they promote in power.
Right.
And obviously we're not big fans of that.
No.
I think most of us at least. So, I don't know, that's the kind of challenge. I don't know.
It's a problem. I just don't have an answer.
Yeah. That was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone else? Comments?
Thank you. Very well done.